Good morning, everyone. This is Pete and Sorella with Drew Coben. You're listening to the Pain-Free Performance Podcast. Drew, what's going on?
Hanging out, man, as you can see, lounging on the couch.
Lounging this nice weather couch.
Yeah, I think we both got some time on this Tuesday morning to talk to you guys about what's been going on. Been taking a course, been doing a lot of coaching, so been super busy, but having a lot of fun with it all. So happy to get going on this talk. I know it's been a few weeks since we were able to link up. Pete, I think you just finished up your doctorate, right?
Good.
So congrats, man.
Thanks, bro. Yeah, it feels good. There's a lot of mixed emotions when I first finished. When you work towards something for so long and then it's finally right there in front of you, it's a bit surreal. But it's funny because everyone kept saying, like, congratulations on your last day of school or your last day of clinical. And I'm like, fuck that. Like, this is day one. Like this, I got this to open up other doors to other opportunities. So, psyched. I got a lot of good things in the works right now. And my mission, my goal is just to bring quality content to all of our listeners. And, that's what I'm aiming to do. So.
Awesome, man. So I like you said, like day one, it's
Day one.
Start of something new. What are some of the things that you're working on now?
Well, I start work next Monday, but really my focus of attention right now is opening up my own side practice. So, you're very familiar with that process, right? Going through the applications and the logos, the branding, the marketing, your templates, your everything, right? Your taxes, your all the things, right? All the things.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm super familiar with all that yet.
Well, it's a work in progress.
I'm starting to learn about it all. It's tricky, dude. It's a process.
It is. So that's where we're going. It's quick turnaround. I only have this week off, and obviously I'm still coaching this week, so time is somewhat of the essence. But you know what? I was very fortunate in that the place that I'll be working as a PT, I'm working 3 days a week. So I'm there 3 12s a week. So I have other times, obviously, to put towards the business and put towards coaching and, building up this podcast and everything else. So, oh yeah, I have to train myself too. That's right.
Yeah, dude, that's been tough for me.
Right. Like as coaches, I feel like that's one of the first things to go when we get busy is our own training.
Yeah. And like I had good weeks. Like last week was really good. And then I had a few days off and it sucks. And then you're just kind of like, I'm so busy, like, let me just focus on other things. But you got to do it. Every time I do it, I feel like I'm more productive, and I feel like it helps me coach too, because
100%.
Yeah, like you're taking some of the stuff that you're thinking about and you're applying it.
So fill me in a little bit with the baseball program that you've been working with. I've been seeing a lot of content on your social media. Everything looks super solid. So just fill me in with your thought processes, where they are in their season, and how you're kind of linking those two things together.
Yeah, so I guess the starting place was with them initially. Like, I just wanted to figure out what we were going to use for KPIs, like what we were going to use. And so what I did was I measured med ball throw velocity, I measured broad jump distance, and I also measured it's like a torso deceleration. So those were my 3 KPIs for them. I had everyone write down numbers, and then I looked at the numbers and decided, like, okay, this guy needs a little more strength, this guy needs a little more speed, so on and so forth. And then I wrote up a program. The program is like essentially designed to cover everything, and then I just make like the tweaks of the acute variables for individual needs based on what we saw with the assessment. So that's how the program works. The way it's designed, outside of that, is like Monday is more of a sagittal plane emphasis. So that's the day that we're working on improving the broad jump. It's not Monday, actually. It's Tuesday. Tuesday is technically day one, so that would be tonight. And then Thursday is day two, and that's like a lateral or frontal plane and transverse plane rotational power day. And then Saturday is more of like the torso deceleration, eccentric type day to build some strength, to work on preserving health, things of that nature. Because we know how important it is to be able to like maximally eccentrically contract your muscles and how important that is for health. So that's like the Saturday day, because on the weekends they usually don't have as many games. So because that's going to be a little bit more stressful, I decided that that would make more sense on the weekends. And from everything I've read, like you only want to do really one day of that, like the high eccentric stress stuff during the season. And it's tricky because these guys are younger. So it's like, does it really matter that much? You know what I mean? But still, you're still trying to make sure they don't get hurt and they still want to play well. A lot of them are doing showcases and trying to get into colleges. So
cool.
I do think it's important. The last thing is it's challenging in that demographic just to like get everything set up right and like get everyone's attention, depending on the group size, depending on the kind of personalities that are in the group. So a lot of times I find myself spending more time like talking to them at the beginning of the session and saying like, hey, this is how things are going to be effective for you. Like you guys have to listen, like, this is how the session's going to go today. Like putting people in specific spots. That way the drills have like a start and a finish point. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe we're using cones just so people know where to go, because you'll run into issues where guys are just like running into each other if you don't do that. Or guys are, some guys are working really hard and other guys aren't working so hard, or you're running out of space in the facility, depending on where you are. So you have to be able to organize that first, and you have to set your expectations first is like the biggest thing that I realized really quickly. And a lot of times, some of the things that I've been doing that have been most effective have been like me actually doing the drills with them and like holding the position and like getting everyone down and then like making them hold it initially so I can coach them. You know what I mean? Like getting them into positions where I have time to coach everyone. Because if I have 10 guys in front of me and they're doing like a real quick action, it's like I'm not going to be able to coach them. They're going to get through 3 reps and then all of a sudden it's like I saw something maybe, but I can't change it.
Right.
So instead, like from the beginning, I kind of did things where they had to stick it, they had to do it on a command, and then there was another action from there, which we all know is important too, because then it's more of that random practice.
Right.
But really the big thing, and it's fun for them too, I think. But the big things for me with that is, they're doing it how I want it to be done. I can coach them. They're not goofing off. There's more attention to detail. And so I spent a lot of time on that initially.
Sure. So let's backpedal a little bit. How often are you measuring your KPIs?
Yeah, this is going to be week 4, so it'll be every 3 weeks, and I'm
Every
going to do
3 weeks. Okay.
It's going to be today again.
Cool. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Do you find any difference in their behaviors when it's test day? I mean, I guess you can only go off of the first one, I suppose, but
Yeah, so the first one wasn't even a training session. It was
just testing.
Yeah, so what happened was I did a big presentation for all the athletes and the parents. Like I had like a PowerPoint presentation on a big screen, and I talked about why all this stuff matters, and gave some examples of when I was a younger athlete and I just trained for strength and how that ended up not being the right route for me. And so I gave a lot of examples and talked to them about why it matters. And then like everyone did the testing, like even kids who aren't in the program. I was like, guys, if you're in the program, this testing is open to you. If it's not, then go home. And like everyone did the testing. And so I was like, all right, well,
Whatever.
because everyone, like, I think, like, really bought in when I was presenting, so
Yeah.
I think we're like, okay, we're going to do the program. And then some of them maybe realized that it didn't work with their schedule afterward. But,
I'm
you know,
interested to see how that goes today.
yeah, yeah, I'll definitely check back with you on that.
So, it's so tough with that age group because you want it to be fun because that's how they get engaged. But at the same time, we understand and we realize how important the stimulus is that we provide, and especially at their age because they can adapt so quickly and so efficiently to that stimulus. That's one of the reasons why I love working with teenagers, right? Like they just adapt to everything that you throw their way, which is awesome, but it puts more stress on us being that we have to put the right stimulus
Mm.
in their programs, right? So, how have you gone about kind of reeling in the session when you feel like it's out of control, and what maybe have you done that has not worked?
Yeah. Um, so it's kind of what I said before. And every time that I tried to make it, like, I try to think about like a program. You think about like your average program. You have like your warm up, you have your pre work, or prep work, whatever you want to call it, which is usually like power stuff. After that, you have kind of like your strength stuff. You have your A series, which is usually like your main lift, and then you have your B series, which might be an accessory or another main lift, and then you have a C and a D series. Every time I'm like, okay, let's get through all this stuff. Let's do 3 sets of everything. Like before I actually do the session, it doesn't go as well. And that's because I think kids just want to get, like, they see all this stuff on paper and they're like, I want to get through all this,
Mm.
and it's not their fault. Like, it's like homework, like, you got to do it all. You know what I mean? They got paper in front of them, they got to do it all. So I think you have to just kind of like really focus on the exercises themselves. And you don't even have to change what's on the paper. You just have to make it clear to them that, like, here's what matters, and what matters is that we get this stuff done right and we spend time on it, and it doesn't matter how long you're resting because you guys are already in good shape. And baseball is a sport that involves longer rest periods and high amounts of power and short bursts of explosive power. And so I'm talking to them about, okay, guys, if we have 7 guys in this group, I need to watch every single one of you deadlift. Like, so you're going to deadlift, and then you're going to go do your other exercise, which is probably something that I've chosen to be like really easy, like a prone, like a plank or something.
Sure.
Um, and so it's like just a static hold. And we already talked about positioning, and I know that's going to be okay. And I can still see them, but at the same time, I'm like, are they really going to get that hurt in a plank? You know what I mean? So, but like a deadlift is different. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to watch every single one of you deadlift, and I'm going to take my time and make sure that I'm giving everyone cues. And I'm definitely, before I'm doing that, giving a few like general cues as I'm going through the demonstration, but I do still want to see everyone deadlift.
100%.
Um, and then you're just using constraints. You know what I mean? Like you can use certain things for certain people. Like, say it's someone that's doing the deadlift and like their range of motion's not there. Like, they can't do it. You're like, okay, like, I'm not going to spend time doing this deadlift with them anymore.
Right.
I'm going to give them an RDL, or I'm going to give them some sort of like hip dominant variation where the kettlebell is elevated or something. You know what I mean? So um, I think you just have to set your expectations as far as like, guys, it's okay if you're resting. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're resting, you should be not goofing off. You should be looking at your sheet. You should be trying to think about technique, like certain things like that.
Yeah. What position and I suppose what variation do you start with when teaching a deadlift? Because the reason why I ask is I found, with my high school athletes that not a lot of them, but a relatively decent percentage still have like their primary spinal curvature, where their lumbar spine is not lordotic, it's more kyphotic. Their spine just hasn't gone through those changes yet. So in that case, I found it very difficult to program and execute proper deadlifts where I had to make some pretty drastic, variations for those athletes. Where do you typically start?
Okay, so because you just said that, that's gonna open up a whole can of worms for me.
I'm sorry. Well, we'll try to stay on topic as much as possible, but I do think it's important to touch on that
So
because I mean, I would.
I'm gonna tell you two different things. I'm gonna talk about two different things. So it
Sure.
depends on what the environment is. Like if it's a group session, you're just gonna have to use constraints, right? But
What do
if
you mean
it,
by that?
I mean constraints as far as the exercise that you're choosing,
Hmm.
right? Like you're probably gonna have to start with the eccentric component first, right? And you're gonna have to work on learning to hinge from the top down.
Yes.
So or you might have to provide some more stability, so you might have to change the exercise and work on doing it in like a kneeling position, or you can do um like some sort of, I would say, like hip dominant variation where they're lying down on the ground. Like maybe you decide you want to change it to that, I don't
Sure.
know. But it depends what you want to get out of it. That's the first thing. So in a group setting, like with that example, I know exactly what you're talking about. I would probably initially, my first instinct would be to go to like a kettlebell RDL instead of a kettlebell deadlift. That would be my first instinct. Um, if that doesn't work, I probably might just go straight to some sort of hip bridge and then pair that with like a PVC pipe hip hinge, or maybe one of the big ones that I use a lot of the time will be like, I'll set guys up with their arms out in front of them,
Hmm.
and I'll have them stand like a foot away from the wall. And from there, it's like bend your knees, reach your butt to the wall, and keep your arms straight. Like don't let your arms drop too much.
Yeah, that's one that I do very frequently too.
Yeah, so that one works too. Um, I mean, you can also, and I don't think you're doing this in a group setting, but you can also, you might do this. You could also work on like breathing and stuff on the ground and then teach guys how to brace in those positions. I don't know how much that actually matters. Sometimes I think it matters with certain people. Um, but like you can get it down maybe without that sometimes. Um, Although, like, I think you still need to do some breathing, so that might be helpful in the warm-ups too.
Yeah.
Just kind of like learning how to actually like use your inhale on a deadlift could be helpful, right? And like use your exhale on a deadlift. Did you want me to touch on like the individual stuff, or did you just want to talk about it in a group?
No, no, yeah, we could talk about it individually as well. I just find that the deadlift is probably the most difficult lift to coach and teach in a group setting.
It's hard to do. Like, I would say I probably wouldn't have like 10 guys deadlifting at the same time.
No, I mean, what? So I obviously want you to say what you were going to say, but
Yeah,
while
yeah.
we're on the group setting part, what I do is we have two mirrors in our weight room, right?
Mhm.
So if I have, 8 guys in the weight room, I'll break them up into two groups of 4. And then I'll just have each guy, one at a time go in front of the mirror. So now I'm narrowing down watching 8 people at a time to 2. I can handle 2. 8, probably not.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and they'll just do, like a set of 5 reps
Hmm.
where that gives me ample time to look at the joints I'm trying to look at. And, it's quick enough so that it keeps moving relatively quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I think that's a great way to do it. The thing for me is like, it's in season, and I don't really care if we just get through some power stuff in
For sure.
deadlift and
For
push
sure.
up. You know what I mean? I don't really care. You know, and I can easily just say, okay, let's add in like a hamstring variation, or, the next day we're going to do split squats.
Yeah.
Or, okay, at the end of this workout today, we're just going to hold split squats.
Mm-hmm.
Now they've gotten in power work, they got in med ball work, they got in some sort of plyometric, they got in some mobility at the beginning, they did deadlifts, they did push-ups, and then they held a 5-minute split squat with load. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's a good day.
So
that's a good day.
That's what I'm saying. And they're in season. So I don't really know what else you need. That's what I mean, is like, you got to think about the program a lot of times is like, how much quality work am I getting in versus like how much is on paper.
Sure.
That's kind of how I've started to think about it.
Let me ask you this. How are you gauging the amount of workload that you're providing to them?
So the way I look at it is like, how much eccentric stress are we placing on them during the season? Because like, that's going to be the biggest thing, I think, that can potentially lead to more fatigue. Like you said before, like if they're doing a trap bar deadlift from the ground and they're just doing like 3 to 5 reps, I don't think that that's too fatiguing.
Right.
It's stressful and it's intense, but it's not that fatiguing in terms of like, they're not going to be that sore. If anything, they probably won't even be sore. All these guys have told me that I haven't been sore once. And I'm actually happy about that, because a lot of times they have games, they literally have games the next day.
Yeah.
And so I'm purposely choosing things that won't get them sore.
Yeah, that was, I mean, I was kind of fishing for an answer a little bit, but that's kind of the answer, right? Like we don't know, like obviously soreness is not the objective, nor is it a very consistent way to measure workload. But yeah, I mean, if they're in season, right, we don't want them to be sore and stiff. They're not going to perform, especially in a sport like baseball where you need to be super elastic in a very wide range of motion. Stiffness is not the answer.
Right.
So that's interesting. Again, like before I have you talk about like individuality with coaching a deadlift, how did you kind of approach the manner that you present this to the coach, right? Because a lot of coaches, especially older coaches who may still have that old school mentality, how did you approach like your presentation of like, this is going to be beneficial for them even while they're in season, even while they're practicing every day and playing 2 or 3 games a week?
I haven't had that issue, because the guy who hired me for this knows of my background
Mm-hmm.
and knows of some of the people that have influenced me. And so that was an easy in with him. And he owns the business that I work for, and he is also the coach of the team. That being said, a lot of the parents have asked me about, the strength type stuff and what kind of things guys can be doing outside of it all. But what has happened is, I think I've tried to do a really good job of explaining why this stuff is going to be more effective than like your CrossFit style workouts. And when I say CrossFit style workouts, I think just a lot of parents see maybe things like this and they think of that as like your average training for these guys, because they see their kid and they think, okay, my kid is just not strong. He's just not strong and he's got to get strong quick. But what they don't understand is, you don't really want to get super strong and toned up quick.
Right.
Right? You want to develop over time, and you want to develop the right qualities for the sport that they're performing. And so that's what I did, is I just presented all this stuff, and then I took some metrics and I talked about why those metrics mattered, and now that's what those kids care about. And it's funny because I think these kids are really competitive, and so they like love the testing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have a blast with the testing, and they love when I use my VBT on the deadlifts.
Sure.
And that's another way that I've been, quantifying some of that stress too, is every week we have a set target for meters per second on the deadlifts, and so a lot of times that's been really effective. Now, there are going to be differences there. And what is a challenge with that, I'll say, is when I tell a guy, you're going to have to go, a little lighter on this. So that is, sometimes that's a challenge, but the VBT can help because then I can say, hey, like, you got to get within this speed range. And what that means is you're not producing enough power. And this is going to be more effective for you because we need you to move this fast, um, and it sucks like when you have to tell a kid like, hey, you got to go down and weight, but
Yeah.
it's part of it. And I think, you can say like, hey, like, this guy weighs more than you, that's why he's doing this. Or you can say, look, you're here, that means you have much more room to go up. So I mean, those are some strategies that can be helpful.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I noticed that, as soon as we start working with barbells and with heavier weights, like everyone just wants to throw more on. And it's like, well, that's great that you can lift it, but how fast are you lifting it?
Yep.
Again, it's that fine balance between force production and acceleration of the movement. All right, so let's talk about, individualism and how you approach individually coaching the deadlift and how that's different than the group setting.
So I guess what I was going to say was like, I think a lot of these kids that are flexing their lumbar spine,
Hmm.
that you're talking about, right? You're talking about not having a very lordotic lumbar spine,
Yeah.
like a flat back posture. Um, so I think with that, a lot of times they're in this position of like a counter nutation of their sacrum. And that's because of who they are and how they bias their breathing strategy. And so a lot of times these guys are these narrow infrasternal angles that are not really biased towards producing force. They're more biased towards like rotation and elasticity, right? And I don't know if you can picture this, but it's like the difference between probably like a baseball pitcher and a catcher, or like a baseball pitcher and a lineman. Like the narrow guy who's more elastic is probably the pitcher, where the lineman who's more of a force producing type guy who has that lordotic curve and more of that like kyphotic upper back is going to be the wide infrasternal angle. And so what you need to think about, and not what you need to think about, but like the question becomes like, should you even like want, you were saying like they haven't developed yet, but like, do you want that? You know what I mean? Because then it just becomes, you're kind of throwing on some layers of like change, really. And the
Yeah.
word is compensation. I hate to say it, but it's like, do you want, I don't know if you want that. That's why it's a question.
Well, I'd certainly want them to be able to hinge without, flexing at their lumbar spine. Do I want to change the type of athlete they are? No, not at all. 100% no. But do I think it's important that they understand how to hinge? Yes. If that's, an RDL versus a deadlift, then fine, so be it. But I do think it's important for them to understand, grasp, and be able to execute that particular movement pattern.
Yeah. And I mean, I I don't disagree, but I think there might be more benefit sometimes to doing squats with those people. Is what I think I would probably lean towards.
And what would you say if they still had that flexed lumbar spine with a squat?
I don't think they would.
Mhm. Okay. I've seen that too. It's
What kind of squat are you doing though? Like what is
oh,
it?
I mean, a suitcase squat, a goblet squat, a back squat. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It's not always the position or the variation of the movement. It's sometimes just their anatomy at that given place in time.
Yeah, so but I think with their anatomy, you might be able to figure out a variation that could work.
Then we go split squat.
Yeah, you could go split squat, or like maybe it's a heels elevated variation. initially.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I really don't know, but I
I,
think
like where I go with the direction that I go with when I see that is unilateral movements.
mhm.
Because when I put them in a fixed bilateral position, if they flex at the lumbar spine, that's just not what I'm looking for. Um, and again, like we don't want to add a load to a dysfunctional movement, right? We don't want to enable bad habits, right? So yeah, I'll go to a split squat, I'll go to an RFE.
So with that, now that I'm talking about this, and you can stop me whenever, by the way.
Yeah, boy. All right, I'm gonna set the timer. Go.
No, no, no. It's just what's happening is these guys who are like this, they bias external rotation. And so they're not going to be able to get that nutated sacral position and get internal rotation of the pelvis. They can't get that position. So that's why at a certain point it's going to be challenging for them to maintain that normal spinal curve.
Hmm.
Like that's why you might be seeing like a change in it. So like a squat a lot of times is going to be more external rotation, but as they go through the middle range of motion, they have to get some internal rotation.
Yep.
And so, but like when you start a deadlift, that's like already you need that right away. Um, so that's why I think split squats are more effective too, because now that's mostly external rotation.
Fair. Okay.
Um, that's at least what I've been thinking about. Um, and I think it helps. It's hard to know. It's hard to know sometimes, but
Yeah, I mean, without doing a full assessment, which we rarely have time to do in that setting, and it is hard to tell. But I think the important takeaway from that segment of the conversation is being able to make variations and adjustments on the fly very quickly in order to keep them safe.
yeah, 100%. And I
Right.
think a split squat's a good way to go.
Oh yeah, you can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
The
Okay.
question becomes, what are we working on? Is it so like, are we trying to produce more force? Are we choosing this exercise to become a more force dominant athlete? Like, are we trying to, you know, increase their force production capabilities? And can this person load the split squat heavy enough for that? You know, that's the other thing. Um, Go ahead.
Feel like at that age they certainly can, right? Like you and I, unless we throw the weight on our back, like I find that like if I do a loaded split squat, as I'm sure you as well, like, and if we just do a suitcase hold or a goblet hold, the limiting factor is going to be the upper extremity, right? Being able to hold the weight, right? Like, so like, months ago, you and I were working with your VBT, with the SSB doing split squats, right?
Yep.
And, you were doing, over 300 pounds. I think I got up to like 275, whatever it is. But you asked me to hold 275, yeah, I'll be able to do maybe one or two, but that's all you're getting out of me, right?
Yep.
So I think at that age, like even doing a front loaded split squat would still provide that load. Again, it depends on who it is, but generally speaking, I would say yes.
Yeah, I think it's stability too. Like you're gonna have less stability in a split stance position than
Mhm.
a bilateral position, which which is why I do think at some point, if your goal is to add force production, you want some sort of bilateral
100%.
exercise with them.
100%.
And you know, and I'm definitely not saying that you shouldn't deadlift guys. I'm just saying, like, in my head, that's why these guys are having trouble doing it. You know what I mean? And for a long time, I was like, why the hell can't these people? You know what I mean? Like, for a long time, I was like, I don't know why this is happening with certain people. And I think right now, at least, I think that's why it is. And I didn't even really go into that much detail, but um, you know, I think what I've done with those type people is you can use SSBs and you can use box squats because that can help them. Like that can help them learn how to position their pelvic floor a little bit better with that. And also you can do like band assisted stuff. Um, I had a video with the guy doing a band assisted squat, but what you don't know about that guy was he literally could not squat 95 pounds. And he's doing like a band assisted box squat with like 185, you know? And so like, to me, that's like probably a lot more effective than if we were to try to split squat him. I would probably still split squat him, but like I would start with the SSB bilateral band assisted so he can learn how to manage his pelvic floor.
So that's interesting. What would you say the difference is between him squatting 95 pounds without, band assistance versus being able to squat 185 with bands? Because bands are likely not going to take off 100 pounds. So
I,
where do you think that disconnect is?
well, I think it's his ability to produce force, and I think it's like as he's going down to 60 to 90 degrees of hip flexion where he needs to be able to access internal rotation,
Mhm.
that's where the band is starting to take off some of the load, because as you go down, the band is stretching. So for someone like that, that's going to allow them to use where they have that position already. So use their counter nutation, right? So at the top before they get to 60 degrees with all the load, and as they go down, it unweights, right? So as they get to that position, it's unweighting. And then the box is there to help them learn how to get that true IR so that their knees don't cave, right? Because the knee cave is really just a substitution for getting hip IR,
Sure.
right?
Do you think it's an IR deficit?
I think these guys that have a narrow infrasternal angle and have this counter nutated sacral position are the guys that lack IR because their breathing strategy is biasing them towards external rotation.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Cool. Anything else on this segment?
Um,
That was good. That was good.
yeah, it's cool, man. There's a lot of it, and it's really useful. It's really useful, and I think a lot of people, and actually myself as well, like I used to hate on this stuff because I've known coaches who like really, really baby people with it. You know, like they really, really just they think of it as all like these low level things, and then guys never train, and then guys become like afraid of training, you know. And I've seen it happen, and it's so frustrating because it's like that's not what this stuff actually is. And I used to think it was that because I didn't know enough about it. But
Mhm.
all it is it's just giving you more information about why certain things are how they are. It doesn't mean you change doesn't mean you change your training process. It just
Right.
means maybe now you understand that there are some variations that are better for certain people than other ones.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a ton of notes down. I love this. Good. 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 So I feel like a lot of, well, hopefully the demographic of listeners that we're striving to, to reach to is young strength and conditioning coaches, right? Those maybe just entering the field, or those, who have been in for a little bit but want to take their career a step further. It's likely that they're going to start somewhere in this adolescent population. Would you
Mhm.
agree with that?
Yeah.
So how do you think we can, help these younger coaches and perhaps, slightly less experienced coaches understand and be able to manage a group of adolescents who, let's be honest, like these are their boys, right? Like, they're all best friends, and they want to have fun, right? There's still the maturity factor that plays a role in the execution of the sessions and how they go. What, what would you say to touch on that?
I think you first have to define your why. Like you first have to say like, I really want to do this for X, Y, and Z. Because if you don't have that, this stuff is so hard. Like it is so hard with these guys. And especially like during this time where all like a lot of these kids are homeschooled and they don't see their boys and then they go see their boys and it's like they're trying to catch up, you know what I mean? They're not talking to anyone. They got to wear masks. Like certain kids are anxious, other kids are pissed off. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So you first got to say to yourself like, this is why I'm doing this and this is where I want to go with this. And I think that's like, if you don't have that, because there's been times where I'm like, crap, man, like, why am I doing this? And then I think back, like, okay, you know, like down the line, this is where I want to be, and this is going to help me get there.
Hmm.
And I enjoy doing it because I was that kid at one point,
Yeah.
you know? So the best thing for you to do initially is say, do I actually want to do this before you start doing it? Make sure you want to do it, understand why you want to do it. And then once you know that, listen to this podcast and look back and say, what are some of the things that he said originally? What are some of the things that Pete said originally? Well, I think to recap, you got to be able to set your expectations initially. I think coach directed activities are the way to go, meaning don't let anyone do an exercise without you telling them to do the exercise. And think about it in terms of what are you trying to achieve with a session, and don't try to compare your session with their session.
Right.
And that's where I'm going to end that one. So
Cool.
if you have anything on that too, Pete.
No, I've always been an advocate of setting very clear expectations right off the rip. So before you start your mobility, before you start your warm up, um, just letting them know, hey, this is my objective for today. And what I did often, especially towards the more recent part of my coaching at the school, is putting something up on the board, like a quote, a mantra, whatever it might be, or, putting up the score of their last game or stats of their last game, right? Like, I remember for basketball, we lost a very close game by 4 or 6 points, but we had 25 turnovers, right? So what do you think went up on the board? 25 turnovers, right? So, I think, and that's a little bit different because again, it's all context. We were just about to start playoffs. We had a really competitive group of guys. So like, is that going to work for every team? Absolutely not. But it's about knowing your audience too. So sometimes, yeah, like, with my girls soccer team, they respond better to a lighter atmosphere and they work harder with that lighter atmosphere. Boys basketball, not so much. They like the heavy rock music and they like the corny mantras up on the board, and that's just how they get amped up. So, but it comes down to two things, right? Knowing who you're working with, and yeah, you're going to have some mixed personalities within that bunch for sure, but also setting that expectation. And a lot of times too, I'm like, listen, like let's work our face off for 60 minutes, and then I'll give you guys the last 15 minutes to foam roll and to talk and to do whatever that so they get a little bit of social time. But I want to make sure when they're doing their mobility, when they're doing their pre-work, that they're pretty focused in on what's going on within that room.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think one thing that you said, or one thing that I got from what you said, was go to your athletes' games.
Yes, it's huge. It's so huge, and we've talked about this in a previous episode too.
Mhm.
But you don't get the full picture of who that individual is just in the weight room. And not for nothing, but we're very good at what we do, but we can't necessarily assess performance in game like scenarios in a controlled atmosphere such as a weight room. Even when we're doing speed and agility drills, like they are cones, they're ladders, they're hurdles, they're fixed, man-made things that do not replicate a game. I don't care what fucking drill you're making these kids do, and going through a ladder and then a couple of hurdles and then weaving it out of cones. Like, I don't care. That does not replicate a game, and you can't do that. Right? So if you go to a game, you see both anticipatory and reactive strategies from these athletes. That's how you get to know who they are. Right? And as a team, that's how you get to know, like, where are they falling apart? Where is the weak link? Like, where do they mentally struggle? And then you can see patterns. Like my soccer team, I coached the varsity soccer team in addition to strength and conditioning last fall, and we absolutely fucking stunk the first 5 to 10 minutes of the second half. So what does that mean, right? Does that mean that halftime we lost focus? Does it mean that we needed to, reintegrate a different warm-up before we took on the second half? Like, you know what I mean? There's just patterns that you pick up at a specific sporting event that you would not pick up as a coach in a weight room.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest parts too is just understanding who the athlete is in like the team environment, like who they are on the team, like who's the leader, you know, and then you can use that to your advantage as a coach too. But not only that, I think it's just important to show them that you care.
Yes.
Like you were the coach, so you had to be there, but like, you know, they want to talk about their games. They want to show you that they're doing well if you're their coach. And if you show up to their game, it's like, oh wow, this guy cares.
Right.
So that's a big piece of it too. But you're right. I think you understand a lot about personalities. Maybe you get a little bit of information from something like, yeah, like when they come out in the second half, they're not playing how they should be. Maybe it's conditioning. Maybe it's just they're coming out stale. But I think a lot of that's on the sport coach too. Like in my setting, the sport coach does a lot of the fixed plays, and they go over those things. But sometimes what I do is I talk to him and say, like, hey, like, how can I complement this stuff? Like, and a lot of the things that they're doing, like they were doing like some sort of fielding drill the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a ground ball and it was a quick reaction where you had to get the ball and then throw it to first base. And so we just worked on first step. I spent some time on mechanics, and it wasn't about me trying to get a ton of stress in. It was about, guys, it's okay to take a repositioning step before you make your first step. Like you don't have to try and like pivot. You know what I mean? You can reposition your center of mass a little bit here as long as your head doesn't move backwards toward the back. Like that's fine as long as your head is staying either still or going in the direction of the play that you want to make, then you're okay. And so we worked on a few different ways to do that. And then you can layer things by making the drills more reactive. You can use tennis balls. You can use reaction on a partner. You can use different kinds of commands. Like I could say left, right. They have to go left or right. I could say you're going to go on one clap. You're going to go on two claps. You're going to do one command with left, right, and then you're going to do another command with a clap, and then you're going to do this, and you're going to get a tennis ball, and then you're starting to really layer things with guys. But the most important part of it all is you got to set the expectation initially, and you got to teach them how to perform the skill with instruction so that they know how to do things properly. And then after you teach them how to do that, then now you're going to start to be able to layer things and make it more game realistic. You're going to make it more reactive so that they can actually transfer that skill into a more random environment, which is what a game is.
Nice. Any other concluding thoughts? Anything else? Feel like we touched on a lot here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think really what we're saying is, um, with younger athletes, make sure you know you want to do it. And then not only do you want to do it, make sure the athletes know you want to do it. Like, show up to their games, make them know you care. Um, and if you do those things, you're going to be okay, even if you don't know everything initially. Just don't be stupid. Like, set your expectations. And if you were an athlete, you're probably in a good position to coach athletes. If you weren't an athlete, do some homework, start to understand the dynamics of things. Talk to coaches who were athletes. Talk to coaches who train athletes. Go to an internship, or listen to this podcast. I mean, I might be biased on that one, but it can be a lot of fun training athletes. It's also hard. So
rewarding, very rewarding.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot of enjoyment that can come from it. It's just you gotta set yourself up for success by defining your values and trying to learn as much as you can. And then my challenge sometimes is like, I'm trying to learn so much, I got to make sure I don't forget other things. And I'm trying to learn so much, I got to make sure that I don't only use one system. And so you got to take bits and pieces from everything. So
nice. Very awesome. So be sure to check out Drew's website. That's www.drewcoben.com. You can also find him on Instagram, Drew Coben. My website should be up and running fairly soon, maybe.
Let's go.
How long that's going to take. So I'll be sure to get that information out to you guys. And then you can also find me on Instagram, Dr. Pete_Incerello. So we have good content out there. Keep listening to the podcast. We'll be sure to get a new one out to you pretty much every week. And make sure you leave a review. If there's anything that you want to hear from us, reach out to us. We're happy to tailor to you. And I think we're going to be planning on getting some more interviews up soon.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Thank you again for listening to the Pain Free Performance Podcast. Hope you all have a good day and happy lifting.